Yeah. What are you drinking there? What is that?
Monster. Waking up.
Isn't it only about like 8? It's not even 8:30 in the morning there, man. The Monster that early?
Oh yeah, dude. It's a daily thing.
Yeah. Do you drink coffee also?
No.
Okay, so there
Zero
you go.
coffee.
Yeah. I mean, people look at you strange when you say that, right? They're like, "What do you mean you
Oh,
don't drink
100%. They look at me like, "What?" And then they look at me even crazier when I can say I can sleep after drinking a Monster.
Yeah. That's pretty wild.
That's pretty wild.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's it called? But your heart rate doesn't increase and all that kind of stuff?
No, I got a Whoop strap on and I can see. Nah, not really. The funny thing is like my resting heart rate is like 48.
Wow. So that's right. Well, you do a lot of like cardio stuff with the skiing, right?
Well, I'm on the U.S. development sled hockey team. So I skate every day for like 2 hours.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
So I'm on the ice and skating, and then I lift, and then I go home.
Yeah, what do you
That's
play?
my job.
Do you play more offensive or defensive on the hockey stuff?
No, I'm a center, offense, 100%.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Hockey. It's like I used to be like the biggest hockey fan ever. When it like
so fun to watch.
Oh yeah, hockey is one of the sports that's actually better to go to than it is
100%.
better to watch on TV. Whereas football, I think it's better to watch it on television than go to the game. And everyone's got
that. 100% there with you on that. I go to Avs games all the time, and it's the best sporting event that I go to. And I go to Broncos games here and there, but even when they were good, it's okay. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I'm so much more of a hockey guy.
Yeah. How many dynasty leagues are you in now?
I'm in 15, something like that.
Yeah, isn't it crazy? Like I've been playing Dynasty maybe for like I would say like 12 years now, maybe around there. And I was in one league for so long, and then about 4 years ago, it just exploded into like 10, and now it's up to 30 Dynasty leagues. It's
dude, I couldn't do that.
Yeah, no, there's got to be. I think Sleeper, like we both play on a lot of leagues on the Sleeper, and they make it easy just to like and another. Yeah. And I think like what happens is, and I think what happens is every time like you get into a league, you develop this attitude like, hey, if I just got one more chance to do a startup, I know I could do it a little differently. I'll take a few different guys. And then what happens is you end up kind of just gravitating to your guys anyway. What's your general philosophy for startup drafts? Like how do you like to attack them? What do you think is the best way? You wide receiver guy, running back. So let's just assume like, Superflex type of league, all the leagues that we'll be playing.
Yeah. So I try and get my foundational back for sure. I get one foundational back. It seemed like this year, especially that my teams that were wide receiver heavy did better. But I don't know if that was just an abnormal year because of the injury rate on the RB seemed very high this year. And I don't know. It just seemed like the teams I went heavy RB early didn't go well because I went heavy in J.K. Dobbins and things like that. So their guys were injured, and that's what happens sometimes. But yeah, I think going forward, I want to start stacking up wide receivers and have just one foundational back that I know it's a for sure guy. And then the RB2 will probably be my weakest position.
Yeah, I'm with you that last year I attacked a lot of the young running backs, right? And some of them, the Travis Etienne's and J.K. Dobbins, obviously those weren't hits for me. But you had DeAndre Swift, you were happy. Obviously, if you got Jonathan Taylor, you were happy. And then my philosophy, my dynasty philosophy was I'll just fill in with the Jarvis Landrys and Robbie Andersons and those type. But I'm with you. And on the first podcast episode that we did for the Dynasty podcast, the RotoWire Dynasty podcast, I had that same thought you did. And I predict the market is going to be there. Everyone's going to be fighting over the young wide receivers now and then filling in the running backs. Like I'm okay just getting Melvin Gordon and James Conner later on, Devin Singletary, and just filling it in. So do you think now like the pendulum is going to completely switch, or is just because we play so much Dynasty, we're seeing it ahead of time?
We're seeing it ahead of time. I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve and what went wrong for our teams this year. And I think experienced players adjust accordingly. But you're right. I think we're gonna see a lot more wide receivers come off the shelf, especially in the early second round. Like in that second round is gonna be littered with wide receivers, just solid. I think that, and then a lot of good RBs are gonna drop to the third round.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I think even in like just redraft leagues, I know we're talking Dynasty, but usually the first couple rounds of Dynasty is not that different from redraft. I mean, everyone wants those top 20 players. You know, I mean, sure, like Derrick Henry is the exception where for some reason we know the reason, his Dynasty value falls, but in reality, he's a top 5 redraft pick, you know? So,
right.
But
I know I'm nervous about him. He's one of those guys that so last year I won not 2021, but 2020. I won some dynasty leagues with Derrick Henry, and in the offseason I sold him because he had that record year. And I told everybody around me I was selling Henry, and they thought I was nuts. And I just told them the playoff grind is going to catch up to these kind of RBs with these heavy workloads later in the year. Everything stacks up, and I think that's exactly what happened. His body finally just broke. And that happens, man, especially when you're getting that type of workload. And playoff football is a little different. Those hits are coming harder. It's a lot more physical, and it just seems like those teams that are perennially in the playoffs over and over and over again, those running backs break down quicker.
Yeah, I mean that definitely sounds like good logic to me. And what we're going to do, and again, we're going to talk about today for people listening to the podcast. We're going to talk about wide receivers that we're going to call them must sells, but I guess if someone's going to pay the freight or sell high.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and Brandon and I both have we're going to define why, because you can make anyone a must buy or anyone a must sell at the right price, but we're going to talk about today like wide receivers that have how I'm going to define it, and then I'm going to let you state your definition. Sure. Wide receivers that probably there's two ways to look at. One, that wide receivers that have a higher trade value than they do actual value. Okay.
Right.
So someone that you could probably get more for than you could do if you kept them on your team. And I think another way to look at it is what you told me, is that players where their value is peaked right now, and you're projecting that the value is going to go down. So you want to sell it. And now here's why I like that definition of it that you gave. But the problem with it is that you're a sharp dynasty player, and we play in a lot of leagues with experienced players. I think that they're able to project those values similarly, but you know what? I think I might be wrong. So talk about just a little bit about your definition of sell higher, or just in general, when is the right time to get a player off of your roster?
So for me, my rules are when I'm going into an off season, I look at guys that set records, set peak production for themselves and personal highs. I look at those players and say, can they do it again? Can they actually be that efficient? Can they actually get the same target share? Can they actually have that many, opportunities that they had in the previous year? I look at roster construction of those teams. Are they going to be bringing in anybody in free agency or draft that could affect said player? Age is another one for Dynasty. I like to at least entertain price checks and options when players hit certain, especially wide receivers hit that close to 30-year-old mark, 29, 28. I'm checking, seeing how much they are worth. And if I can cash in, and if my teams are, it really depends on the construction of my team. And if I won in those teams and I see older players, I have no hesitation in selling off assets to replenish the pipeline, because usually when you're winning, your pipeline of picks and whatever is kind of depleted because you're going all in most of the time, things like that. Like, you got to look at players that I'm going to be talking today. Davonte Adams, that's a guy that, he's 29 years old and he's got an uncertain future and all these things, and production's at an all-time high. That's a guy I'm going to do a price check on. And if there's a package out there that I really like, I have no problem selling high-end assets, especially if I'm in I just won, and I need to get youthful, and I need to things like that. Because
what you're saying though is what you're saying is if you have a successful fantasy season, you're almost, and I think a lot of dynasty players think this way. Like they're so nervous that like I got to start thinking about the future. I think that sometimes they forget like these solid veterans. These veterans are okay to keep on my roster, and I think that's an edge where I try to exploit, and that's what's going to be interesting about this conversation today. Like, and I'll give you an example.
We're a little opposite.
Well, it's just there's just different. That's what's great about Dynasty is that there's a lot of different paths you could take to gain an edge, and it's not like redraft, for example. Like injured players that are out for 6 weeks still have actual value, whereas a DeAndre Hopkins was droppable in redraft once he got hurt. You would never see that happen. And what I was going to say about Hopkins is I've heard Chad Parsons say this on his podcast. And what he talks about is, what do you care about the price of your house if you're going to live in it? You don't care what the market value of your house is. You just enjoy the house, right? And that's what a player like DeAndre Hopkins is. He's just going to give you that. Maybe he doesn't produce like he once did, but if you trade him, if you sell him, you're not going to get what it's actually worth in production. So that sometimes is a buy low.
Yeah. Oh, I actually have D-Hop as a buy low for 2022. I've been in a big debate with the guys over at Flex Network about it. I'm a buy low on Kyler Murray and a buy low on D-Hop and that offense in general. Everybody's a little pissed off about the end of the season towards Kyler, and I think we're going to be able to buy low on him.
Yeah, I agree too. Like it's when someone comes off, if you're going to believe in a player in general and they come off a 4 or 5 game stretch, especially to close the season where it kind of sits with you for the rest of the year and there's no plausible like, hey, this is how I can explain it, then that's a good buy low window. Like, and the opposite of that would be someone like Trevor Lawrence, who had an all-time bad season for what his expectations were. And then, but everyone, the comfortable narrative is that it was poor coaching. So Trevor Lawrence, in a couple of the startups I've already did, is still a locked in top 24 pick in Superflex drafts, and he's probably like QB7 or QB8. All right, so
that makes sense.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna use our theme of must sell wide receivers based on those definitions that we talked about, and we're gonna see where the conversation takes us. So your first must sell, he was the headliner of our discussion and of our thumbnail. It was Cooper Kupp, and I think people are spinning up their breakfast right now. But I actually agree with you here. So you alluded to it a little bit before, but talk about why you should be shopping Cooper Kupp in your dynasty league.
Absolutely. I mean, when somebody sets records and are we really going to expect him to have 1,947 yards again? I don't think so. I think whenever a player maxes out value or maxes out opportunities, that is something that you got to understand and look at in the future. It doesn't mean it's going to happen over and over and over and over again. This was a special year. And if you can capitalize on Cooper Kupp and have somebody overpay for him, why not? I totally understand.
Let me stop there because I want you to define that. Because someone right now is saying, okay, fine, Cooper Kupp had an all-time season, but in redraft, he's going to be wide receiver 1, 2, or 3. So we can reasonably expect him to be a top 5 receiver. And then you use the term overpay. And I want you to define what that means. So what does that mean? Like, what would be a return that you could plausibly get for Cooper Kupp that you wouldn't say no to? Define that.
I think you can get said player and 2 first-round picks for Cooper Kupp. No problem. He is
an example of a player.
That I think anybody within a wide receiver 2 area,
like Terry McLaurin,
Terry McLaurin and 2 firsts, a guy that can stop gap that wide receiver 1 position for you, and then you have the opportunity to go get 2 other younger studs to infuse youth into your rosters. Like I said, you always got to shop your top tier talent just to see if somebody is going to overpay you and give you 3 firsts, something crazy like that. That is very, very plausible. That can happen. That another one where I would go is I would take Cooper Kupp and I would go trade him for Javonte Williams and go get a top tier running back. Yeah. just flip the position and get a 22-year-old back that is going to be coming into a top 5 running back position for the next 5 years. Yeah. You're going to get that from him.
Yeah, that's a good trade. But here's where I think dynasty player, and that trade, both those trades you said, I think you can execute. Terry McLaurin coming off the down,
absolutely.
Terry McLaurin coming off the down year, and then obviously if you have some middle of the road first round picks or whatever. But what I'm saying is that if we think about this logically for a second, over the next of the 2022 and 2023 season, let's just take this conversation, put it here for a second. Who's likely to have more fantasy points, Cooper, Kupp, or your 2 first round picks that you're just let's call them like pick 7, right? Who's likely to have more fantasy points over the next 2 seasons? Well, both of those picks or Cooper, Kupp.
Well, if you look at who was your seventh overall pick last year, Jalen Waddle. Like, come on. Right. Like, I mean, last year, Devontae Smith, guys like that, they were all over the place. And especially with the new age of college, the wide receiver talent is so stacked that it's just a straight up turnover. You can get great wide receivers later on. You're never going to be 100% on your draft picks. That's never going to happen. But I wouldn't mind going after young talent and having that infused and then flip. You can literally flip. If you had if you did that deal last year, or if this was last year and you got Terry McLaurin, Jalen Waddle, and you got yourself a Elijah Moore in the later in the first or second round. I mean, wouldn't you take that deal right now? I would. I would take that. I would not. I would. I would. I would. 100%. Well, I would take that deal in 100%.
Yeah, and I think the market agrees with you. I think that most people would take that deal. In fact, in one of the dynasty leagues I've been in for a while, and it has good players in it, and Cooper Kupp was traded for. I'm just trying to think the exact. It was Kadarius Toney, Amon Ra-St. Brown, and maybe a first. It was definitely a pick, a late first. So again, it just gives you a sample. This is a real trade that went down, not a hypothetical, because it's so easy to say, oh, trade this guy, flip that guy. But it's tough to get to understand, like, to actually execute these trades. So what I'm saying is that what I've identified, and again, my strategy here is I'm still in the middle of a startup in a startup draft right now. I'm in the late rounds. And what I did was everyone's fighting over the youth, as they usually do in these drafts. And what I did was I just collected all of the veterans. So my team is older. So I'm on this little older veteran stuff. Like, my team is, I have played. So in my first pick, I took Jonathan Taylor, which is, again, that's fine. But then it's like Grandpaville. I have Derrick Henry. I have Coop. I have Mike Evans. I have Keenan Allen. So you get the vibe. I have Travis Kelce, like in the 4th round. So you understand. So there is an edge to be had. Now there is cliff danger there. You're going to have to figure out ways to reload if things don't go right. But I think that win now is undervalued in Dynasty, especially in startups, and especially in February, where the most passionate Dynasty players are rookie crazy and youth crazy. All right. So
I actually agree with you 100% on that. I'm a very win now guy. I go in all the time whenever I think I have a chance, and then if I don't make it, I always sell off assets and get picks back. But I do agree with you. I look at Dynasty in 2 to 3 year windows, just like you do. But when somebody maxes out that value, like, you really got to contemplate it. You really do.
And I think you've seen this a lot. I for the record here, I think you're a sharp Dynasty player. You know what you're doing. You've won leagues. You've won our high money league. But what I think that a lot of our colleagues and friends, and admittedly I do too, we suffer sometimes from sexy roster syndrome. We love looking at our sexy roster with our young players on it, and we forget Keenan Allen is likely to outproduce Amon Ra-St. Brown by 20-30% this year. And that's what matters. Hey, we're going to take a quick break right here. We're going to tell you about WinBet. RotoWire. Let me say it back. So WinBet, What a terrible read. Let me say it clean again. All right. If there's one thing we appreciate here at RotoWire, it's making good decisions. And even more so, it's making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you from RotoWire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now exclusive sponsor of the RotoWire Fantasy Dynasty podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more at your fingertips. WynnBET is currently available in 8 states, and while rapidly expanding at WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500. Download the WynnBET app now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner of the RotoWire Dynasty podcast. It's a mouthful. Trust me.
Yeah, that was you did that way better than I ever could.
Hey, we're grateful, WynnBET. They're sponsoring the podcast. They like what we're doing here.
Awesome.
We're happy. All right.
Yep.
So what we're talking about today is I'm here with Brandon Adam of the Flex Network, and we're talking about Dynasty must-sells. And like we said, there's a price for everything. If somebody's going to overpay, sure. But there are players, and this is where I call them must-sells. Players that have higher perceived value than they do actual value. Now, you can make an argument. He's not on my list, but like someone like Amon Ra-St. Brown. Okay. Amon Ra-St. Brown would be my first actually, so I'm going to put him on my list. My first must sell. Yeah. Not because I don't think he's a good player or he has a chance to produce, but he's a 4th round pedigreed pick. The chances are the Lions are going to add a 1st round wide receiver, whether it's early or late. They have a couple picks. I know they have the Rams pick late. So that could be a quarterback. They have another pick early. Some people speculate they won't add a wide receiver, but they're going to add somebody. There's going to be some good free agents on the market. And I think that Amon Ra-St. Brown, an incredible finish to the season, you could probably get the equivalent of a top 5 rookie pick for him. And if you could do that, I think people, if somebody has pick 105, they're going to cough it up for Amon Ra-St. Brown. He's going as a top 36 wide receiver. So this I may sound foolish in 18 months from now, but I think there's an opportunity here to explore the market. Now, Cooper Kupp, like you said, had the all-time high season, but he's a good player with multiple years of proven production. Sure. Whereas Amon Ra-St. Brown, you might be able to get 2 firsts from him if they're later on. So absolutely. I like the player, and I would love to have him on my roster, but I think that his market value is higher than what his actual value is. I project it going forward. What do you think about that philosophy?
Hey, man, we can dissect how to sell or your critique or whatever you want, or your the way you think about how you want to construct your roster. That's totally fine. I think that's great. If you can get, like you said, if you can get somebody to give you more than the real value of a player, you always got to consider it. I mean, even if he was a rookie stud that's super young, that had he was what wide receiver 7 for the last like 4 or 5 weeks. He was unreal.
He won you. If you won a championship, there's a good chance Amon Ra-St. Brown was on your roster.
I literally missed the playoffs by 1 loss in 1 league where I had Amon Ra, and if I would have just squeaked in, man, it would have been I would have murdered everybody with Amon Ra for sure. Well, and I totally agree with you though.
Let's talk about his market value. Like in redraft leagues, in 1 QB redraft leagues, where do you think Amon Ra-St. Brown is going to end up getting drafted next year?
Top 30 of the wide receivers for sure.
He'll be so like 5th, 6th round.
Yeah, 5th round for sure. I think he'll be 5th, 6th round, 100%. Like somebody's going to reach for him because they're going to see that production and they're going to just say they aren't going to. I think what happened with Ayuk last year happened to Amon Ra in a way where injuries funneled volume to him in a big way, and that's why Ayuk struggled this year because Kittle, Debo were both back. And they finally had a good run game that was consistent with Elijah Mitchell. That is something that people got to understand. Injuries is a big part of volume. And that's what happened with Amon Ra. And that most likely, I think they will be getting a wide receiver in this draft. And
Amon Ra-St. Brown could still be good, even if there's another receiver. Absolutely. It might actually help him. I'm just saying that.
It will.
Yeah, you could just explore, because I think that you could maybe take Amon Ra-St. Brown. You always think like sell these guys and then cash out for picks, but I think there's another way to do it. I think you could add your 1st rounder to Amon Ra-St. Brown and maybe get up to an AJ Brown. You can
Yes,
you can go the other way too. So it's again, you could not
that's
do that.
money. I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
I think that
yeah.
is something. There's only so many alphas in this league. And if you can stack up those alpha wide receivers and those top 8 wide receivers every single year by points per game every single year the last few years, that is something that is smart to do. That I could totally see that happening, and that's a smart strategy as well. Cash out while it's hot.
Right, because we always think about go the other way, like take a dollar, split it into 4 quarters, but sometimes you could take more and then add up. So
it's all on roster construction. It's all on your rosters. I mean, honestly, it's really your rosters and how well your roster is constructed.
I like what you said though about like just there's only so many alphas. See if you can collect those guys by using hot items, hot assets. So a player that you have on here that I like, that I think it's an interesting to talk about because I ranked him high, but I've had some pause, and that's Dionte Johnson. Okay, so Dionte Johnson's on your sell list. Just state the case here because I want to talk about him. There's a couple different ways to look at him. So why are you selling Dionte Johnson off your roster?
We have zero idea what quarterback is going to be there. That is the problem to me. And honestly, I think with any other quarterback besides Big Ben, Chase Claypool would be a lot more of a factor in that offense. I think Big Ben totally struggled throwing it down deep down the field, and that limited and capped Chase Claypool. And I think a lot of those targets flooded over to Dionte, and we're going to find out that when there's actually a real quarterback there, they could throw the ball a little bit deeper, and they're going to take those shots, and they're going to have bigger plays and splash plays in their offense. I totally see that happening. And I think they could also, maybe if they have to trade for a veteran quarterback, if they want that, if only way Deonte Johnson keeps this value at the production rate he's at right now is if they go get a real veteran quarterback. That's the only way. With a rookie, I don't see him getting funneled all these targets and being this efficient.
Yeah, I like what you said there because I have Dionte Johnson ranked pretty high. I have to, if I pull up the RotoWire Dynasty Superflex rankings, he's probably like wide receiver 9 or 10. And it's because he pops off the page. He's a good player. He's got, he could do it all over the field. He could do it in the mid range. And I think like no matter what quarterback is in there, he's going to be part of the game plan. But what you said that really resonated with me was that Chase Claypool was marginalized by the limitations of Ben Roethlisberger. I like that. So
100%.
I mean, let's just use an example of like an extreme case. Like one of the worst starting quarterbacks last year was Drew Lock when he got the opportunity to start. But if Drew Lock was a Pittsburgh Steeler, Chase Claypool would get 5 or 6 bombs, So no matter who they bring in there, it's going to be better for Claypool because I think they realize they have an asset and they're not stretching that part of the field. So Dionte Johnson, okay, if you're actively looking to get out of him, I think he's a hot commodity. So what quarterback would make you feel comfortable? So of the free agent quarterbacks, let's say it's not a rookie, right? I mean, there's a lot of rumors they're going to trade up to get a rookie, but if it was Jimmy Garoppolo, if it was, I'm trying to, who else is out there right now that's, because forget the superstar quarterbacks. None of them are going to Pittsburgh, I don't think, because they don't have the assets. Who are some of like the tier 2? I mean, we can discuss that, but likely they'll get a tier 2 quarterback. So who else is out there? Jimmy Garoppolo.
Jameis Winston. That's another guy. I don't know. Really,
Winston
Jimmy
would
G
be
is like the only guy. I think for Deonte Johnson, if Jimmy G went to Pittsburgh, that's a perfect fit for Deonte Johnson. That would absolutely be money. That would be my nightmare if I traded him and Jimmy G went there. That would mean I just gave up a short pass thrower and gave up a guy that can run those short intermediate routes like nobody can do it. That would suck. But I think Jimmy G is going to be somewhere else. But I don't know.
I don't like to tangent too much, but where do you think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to end up? Where is your prediction?
I like Washington a lot for him. I think that is if I'm Jimmy G, I'm going straight to the NFC. I am not going to any AFC teams because AFC teams are. I understand. He does. I think he does. I think the Niners actually respect the hell out of that guy, and I think they're gonna actually do good by him and let him kind of dictate where he's gonna go next.
I'll tell you why. I mean, that sounds nice and fluffy, but he's hardly earn the respect of, like the Tom Brady, like, hey, where do you want to go? And I would think that they, because wherever he goes, he has a monster year left on his contract. So they're going to take what they can get. If some team is offering them, just say hypothetically, a first-round pick, another team's offering them a second-round pick, they're not going to say, hey, Jimmy, we'll send you to the more optimal location for the second round. They're going to take their first-round pick.
So, 100%, yeah.
Yeah, I thought the Jimmy G landing spot is going to be Carolina Panthers. But again, it's just a guess at this point. Yeah.
That's
Washington, I think they're eyeballing a mobile quarterback. I heard you guys say on your podcast you like the rookie to go there. One of you guys said the Malik Willis, but I think Mitch Trubisky is going to be a more sought after quarterback this offseason than most think. And Trubisky, fine, it didn't work out well, but I could see him having a Ryan Tannehill-like resurgence on another team. I'm not saying he's great, but I think he'll be really good for fantasy. Let's stick to your topic.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and who knows? These are guesses. I like what you said there. Dionte Johnson, okay, so there is risk in selling him. You will see that.
Sure.
Because he's a good
100%. Player. Anytime you sell a good player and he does, I'm not saying that he's not going to be a great player. I'm just saying he's going to drop in value. And I just don't like uncertainty with my rosters, especially at the wide receiver position where it's dependent on a quarterback. It's extremely dependent. I don't see Mason Rudolph being able to carry the water for this team. I think if they don't pick up anybody and they just roll with who they got, Haskins and Mason Rudolph, that is a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. And that is going to stifle the offense, and it's not going to be nearly as productive, even though Big Ben is gone, even though, Mason Rudolph has a stronger arm right now. But he won't be able to run the offense the same. I don't see the production being the same.
Yeah, Mason Rudolph, I mean, you have to have like a baseline of quality to support fantasy receivers. And
absolutely.
The baseline's not even that high. For example, it's like, if Andy Dalton is the quarterback on a team, you're not like, oh my God, Andy Dalton's that great, but at least he can reasonably support a couple fantasy options. I think that we all agree Mason Rudolph, Drew Lock, those guys are a little bit below that Mendoza line. Let's move on.
They're all
bit
backups.
here. Yeah. So you have Amari Cooper on your sell list. Now, where do you start with this? Do you think Amari Cooper is going to be a desirable fantasy asset? Because I've a couple of the leagues I start seeing him on the block. So when we talk about sell high or must sell, this might be the example of what we were talking about in the beginning, where he might have more actual value than his trade value. So in a sense, aren't you really selling low on Amari Cooper?
Yeah, I think there's Amari Cooper stands out there that you can sell him to. I think people fall in love with that offense, the Cowboys. I just am terrified of CeeDee Lamb becoming the number one in that offense. I think after the playoffs, after seeing the fact that when they didn't go to Lamb at all, and they struggled mightily. I think, do we really believe that they got CeeDee Lamb to be the wide receiver 2, even going into their third year? I don't think so. I think they're going to give him that elite work target share. And if you're going to be able to sell Amari Cooper, this is the time to do it. Because after this time, I think his stock is going to be just gone. I think you got to cash in at some point, and if you haven't done it already, you have to do it now. You should have did it last year.
Yeah, I take the it's funny because I would put and I think that's really sound logic. I put Amari Cooper on the other side of the ledger. I have him as a buy low, and of course, that we talked about in the beginning, you could have any player on any side of the ledger and make the case for them. But here's the reason. Amari Cooper is likely to produce like a top 17, 18 wide receiver. He does qualify for me as a set it and forget it, where even if he has, 3 catches for like 27 yards, you're not wondering whether you should play him the next week. You are playing him because the upside still exists. And if you could, reasonably get him, you're going to get him for a price that's likely outside of the top 30 wide receivers, right? You're going to be able snap call, you'd be able to trade Amon Ra-St. Brown for him straight up. Somebody would do that in a heartbeat, I think. I mean,
I would take Amon Ra over him right now.
Right.
Like that.
And
That's something I would do 100%.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I think that's why. And I think that lines up with what I'm saying is that if we were to take, if we were to reasonably project which one of those wide receivers will have a better year next year, and I know Dynasty is not just about next year, but it's so hard to project out 2-3 years. I mean, I'm going to take the Amari Cooper side of that bet just based on his pedigree, his setup, and all that kind of stuff. But I think Dynasty players are going to be, I think Dynasty players overvalue youth, and that's the basis for my buy lows. Whereas
100%, I think you're right on that. Yeah.
So that's where I fall on it. So Amari Cooper, yes, he is a deteriorating asset, and it's like you pointed out, it's easy to see that CeeDee Lamb should take the more
huge
than
leap
role. Yeah. I mean, but he hasn't done it yet, so it's a little concerning. And again, it may not even be any fault of his own. So that's where the Amari, and I don't. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it may not be any fault of his own. But it's so far we just haven't seen it. And Amari Cooper, he's kind of an all-timer in the fantasy world too, right? I mean, he's just been productive for so long, and he's age 28. He's not over the cliff.
He's not that old.
Wide receivers like that tend to age a little bit better. The more of the route running guys. So let's move on. Let's go. The next guy on your list. Did you have any more Amari Cooper thoughts before I moved on?
No.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting case because I think the market's going to agree with you. I just see, I wouldn't trade Amari Cooper unless I was getting the full value for him, and I don't think you can. Yeah, because there's a guy in my league trying to sell him right now, and nobody's offering a first-round pick. All right,
really?
Here we go. Yeah. I mean, it's just a sample of one, which means nothing, right? I mean,
you got to get in people's DMs and talk people up, man. That's just You got to be a salesman sometimes.
And we're going to talk about trade strategy at the end. I want everyone that's listening to the podcast to stay towards the end because we are going to talk about trade strategy. All right, the next guy you have on your must-sell list or sell-high list is you have Hollywood Brown. Started the season really hot. Okay, cooled down towards the end. Talk about why you're trying to trade Hollywood Brown off of your roster.
Hollywood Brown is he's not a number one wide receiver in an offense. I think we figured that out. I think over the last 3 years, I believe the reason I think the Ravens agree with me. The reason they went and got Bateman is because he fits that wide receiver one kind of stature. I think Hollywood Brown is more of a Deshaun Jackson type of talent, and I think he's more of a shot play type of talent. I think you can't base your whole offense off of him. I think it's pretty evident that, and I mean, this was one of his best years, and he was still only a wide receiver 2.
Hollywood Brown finished as wide receiver 21 on the year.
Exactly. I mean, and that was his best year. And that is, to me, that's telling me that he just doesn't have the consistency to be your wide receiver 1 for an NFL team. And I think that's why they went and spent first round capital on Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman is going to cut into that target share for Hollywood Brown as well. And we're going to see Bateman rise to what we thought he was going to be as that wide receiver 1 in that offense. And they're going to be able to use Hollywood Brown correctly, how he is supposed to be used. He got overdrafted, I think, and he should have been a second round, third round pick really in the NFL draft. I think people fell in love with his Oklahoma numbers, and he snuck up higher in that draft. But to me, I believe Lamar Jackson, I think he has a hard time throwing to those smaller guys. I think he's a little bit inaccurate. So I think he needs a little bit of size to fix his inaccurate throws here and there. That's why he loves the Mark Andrews. That's why, Sammy Watkins was a thing whenever he was healthy. I believe when Rashad Bateman is healthy and with a full offseason, I think he's going to cut majorly into Hollywood Brown's production, and you're not going to see I think he's going to be a wide receiver 3 from here on out.
Yeah, I think that's fair analysis. And the reason that I wouldn't have included a Hollywood Brown on my list is that I still think he's a good player. And I think that my expectations are more that, like you said, like I put him in my wide receiver 3 spot, and you're going to get those 2 catches. What's that?
You're going to get those boom weeks, and then you get the bust weeks.
Yeah. Hang on, let me make this point here is that you're going to get your 2 catches for 28 yards. But what you do is you leave a player like that, and kind of like what Will Fuller was before his explosion year, is that at any given week you could have that 35-point explosion. You're going to have the 6 catches for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I don't mind players like that on my roster. Now, when you talk, I think the market. The dynasty market reflects that. Like, I think he went wide receiver like 25 in my most recent draft. So the price on him, I think, is back in line with what the expectations are for him as a player. So when you're talking about must sell, I'm not sure anyone's going to overpay for him. But sure, if there's a Hollywood Brown fan out there that's going to pay for him. So yes, these are players that value have dropped from the year before. I wouldn't classify him as a must sell, but I think that all those things that you pointed out was, if anyone in your league is high on him and they want to give you a player, but he still has youth too. So I think we disagree on that one, but no disagreement on the fact that his value is lower than it once was, especially since he started off the season so hot. So it's an interesting debate there, because Hollywood Brown is not a blue chip player in anyone's dynasty roster, but he's certainly an every week starter on most of my teams that have 3 receivers.
I mean, I see a lot of guys that hype up Hollywood Brown they still have faith that he's going to be this guy for, like, he's going to be an AB, like a smaller wide receiver 1. I just don't see the same talent. I don't see the same route tree. I don't see the consistency to be the wide receiver 1. And like I said, I think Bateman is going to be the guy, and I think he's going to really drive the reason I'm saying sell while you can. It's the way I look at it is, like I said, if you're going to see a guy take a hit to value in the future, you may as well get rid of them now and try and cash in as much as you can, and then try and flip your assets, throw them in a package and trade up for somebody. Like you were saying, like, put them in something, give a pick, and go get yourself somebody on the wide receiver 15, like a Terry McLaurin. Go get somebody like that and like be more consistent. And I just don't see the Ravens offense using him as at the same target share as he had this year.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I agree that he's a lid lifter. He's like better for an NFL team than he's going to be for your fantasy team. He's one of those guys. He's necessary. Every team needs a guy like that.
Needs him. Yeah.
But will he be consistent for fantasy? I don't think so. But again, there's a lot of fantasy players that when you, especially on your dynasty team, when you have to start 3 wide receivers and a flex. They like the Jarvis Landry types in their wide receiver 3 spot. I tend to like the boomer bust guys in there, and just know that I can win my week with a player like Hollywood. So I don't think you're going to have to pay a lot, but you're looking to move him off your roster and move Bateman in. I certainly respect that call.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Next player I want to talk about is you had talked to me offline. Who knew in 2022 that Hunter Renfro was going to be a polarizing player? It's very interesting. Right? I like Hunter Renfro. You don't like him moving forward. I'm interested, and you know what? There's going to be he's going to be an interesting test case. So I'm going to be quiet while you make the case why you don't want Hunter Renfro, because his value is high right now. Yep. Maybe not in some of the dynasty circles. I don't know why this man doesn't get respect. Tell me why you're trying to get Hunter Renfro off of your roster.
I think I think it's another Ayuk thing. I think it's a volume. He got volume because of injuries and people not stepping up to the plate like Bryan Edwards. I believe when Waller is back, he's not going to be getting the same touchdown efficiency as he had. He had 9 this year. I think he's not going to get the same looks inside the 10. And I think he's going to have – he had a 21% target share this year. And when I think this year – the Raiders would be very smart to go get themselves an outside wide receiver to throw into that offense, to help out that offense, to help out Derek Carr, because you can't rely on a guy like Hunter Renfro, a 5'10", 185-pound wide receiver, day in or week in, week out for years to come. I think you got to get more talent into that offense, and by doing that, I think that's going to affect his production. I also believe because of the missing talent around him, this was his ceiling. I think we really saw his ceiling. I think we really did. I don't see. Could he be any more efficient? I mean, I'm asking you. Do you see him becoming any more efficient than he was? I mean, even if his target share creeps up maybe a point or two. I mean, I just don't see it.
Here's why I categorized him in the buy category rather than the sell, is because the dynasty market hates this guy, and they don't like his profile. They don't like, everything that you're saying. I think the market agrees with you. And what I'm saying is that the reason why he's a buy low is because whatever you have to trade to acquire Hunter Renfro is going to be less than the production that he likely gives you. So whereas, for example, if you trade someone and then it's the opposite way, right? So I think that, like, say, for example, let's just use rookie picks because that's what dynasty players love to talk about. They love rookie picks.
Yeah, we always talk about those.
Right. So let's say I have pick 13 in a rookie draft, right? That's pick 2.1 in most 12-team leagues. And I go to you right now, Brandon. This is like live on air here, right? And I say, hey, I'm going to give you pick 2.1 in our Superflex league. Just give me Hunter Renfro. I mean, you're snap calling that. Yes. Am I right?
Probably not. Actually, I think that is a little cheap. I think you can get more from him. I've been seeing you can get into top 10 territory for Hunter Renfro because of that production.
Then,
you can sell that. You can sell that.
Fair enough.
And I think you can get more.
Right. Okay. I don't think, again, I would like to see real trades like that. That'd be interesting. Yes, sure. That would be then he fits the sell high. If you're getting rookie pick 110 for Hunter Renfro, you sell high.
I think you can.
What I'm saying is that I think just based on the startups I've did and where he's valued, he's going outside the top 36 wide receivers right now. I think he went wide receiver 44 and wide receiver 50 in the 2 drafts I did. So I'm saying that that's a buying opportunity. He's still only 26 years old. He produced in college with Deshaun Watson. He caught the game-winning touchdown in the championship game. I mean, that's a moment. Yeah. And what I also see, and I had this discussion with Jim Coventry on the SiriusXM show yesterday, is that Josh McDaniels coming in as the head coach, I think benefits Hunter Renfro. Now it was partially Brady that loved to throw to the slot, but Josh McDaniels designed the offense that made Julian Edelman and Wes Welker very fantasy relevant. And Derek Carr, he's not a Tom Brady, but he certainly profiles as the type of player that he already has a rapport with Hunter Renfro. And I think that the system coming in complements that. I like Hunter Renfro a lot, but I think the dynasty market's going to agree with you. I'm looking to acquire him as a buy low, but if someone else, there's going to be people that, like you said, that say, hey, look at the production. Finished it here. I had it right here. He finished as wide receiver 10 on the year.
Yeah, 10.
So, I just think here's my issue is
that's a ceiling year to me. That's wild.
My expectation is that he will not finish. My expectation for Hunter Renfro, my redraft rank of him would be like wide receiver 23, wide receiver 26, it's something like that. But that would be my projection. I wouldn't rank him there because I wouldn't have to draft him there. I'd probably rank him as wide receiver 28, but he probably, is going to finish as a top 24 wide receiver. But again, that's projection. So, certainly not. Yeah. Coming off the career year, if you can get something from him and if you don't think he could do it again, that's an interesting call. All right, let's get into some. We'll come back with the last little bit here. I want to get into trade strategy. So you hear experts, you hear podcasters and radio and analysts all the time talk about trade this guy, trade that guy. Trading is hard. It's not an easy thing to do. What do you think is the best way? You're just in a random league here with a bunch of strangers or maybe some friends, dynasty league. What is the best strategy to getting a trade actually completed?
Hey, do everything possible to create rapport with that owner. Like I'm talking, buddy them up, man. That is the biggest and most bulletproof way of being able to get trades done. In my opinion, especially when you're in new leagues. But just start reaching out to people before you start trading. You got to start talking to people. Get cozy with people. Get people talk about football in general with people, and get them being a friend. And then you can start pushing trades. And then you can start doing that. Don't be those guys that.
Pause right there for a second. That's great. No one's ever said that on the show because I asked that question to everybody that comes on here. No one has said build rapport prior to the trading. Hey, you have a Seattle Seahawks logo. Hey, who's your favorite Seahawk? Do you think they're going to trade Russell Wilson? That's really good. First, build casual rapport before you're going into car sales with them, right? Go ahead,
100%. 100%, because if you go in there with no contact and you're just some random dude on the site in the cyber universe and you send in a trade that's borderline, most of the time it's not going to be accepted.
Right. Everyone thinks you're screwing them over, right?
Everybody assumes the worst. Everybody assumes the worst. You know what I mean? Like even when you're overpaying for people, they assume the worst. Like you get even good trades for them, like that lean their way. People will say no because they're scared to death to make a deal with some stranger. And so what I try to do is I literally try and talk up everybody. Like that's an
interesting psychological phenomenon. It's the same thing when you go into a car dealership. You automatically think 100%. The guy's effing you, you know?
So, 100%.
So let me ask you that. When you say you go in there and you talk everyone up, what does that mean? You go to their roster or your roster and you start talking about players that, like, explain that a little bit.
I just send a small message to them. Just these are the players, a group of players I'm looking at to acquire in in leagues I'm in. And if you have any interest, let's talk about it. And then that usually leads into a conversation every single time. Like, because then they go into why they like those group of players, and then they tell you exactly what their mind is thinking. And most of the time, whenever I try and acquire somebody, I actually talk about multiple players. I talk to them about multiple people, not the target I want. The target, I send a couple options out. I go, if I'm looking, like if somebody has Terry McLaurin and Elijah Moore, and I really want Elijah Moore, you can start talking about Terry McLaurin, and then you'd be like, yeah, and then you start chatting them up about Elijah Moore, and then you send them a deal towards Elijah Moore, and then you can maybe pick them up. But you just got to get into a safe zone with owners, man, like where they kind of are, build some trust. Don't be a total freaking degenerate and just try and screw people over. Like that.
We know guys like that, don't we?
Oh, dude, you can't just send random terrible trades to people and then think they're going to respect you for doing that. And that's never going to build rapport with anybody. What's your response when someone sends you the random terrible trade? Do you automatically reject it? Do you send them back a worse deal? Like, what's your reaction when someone sends you an obvious lopsided deal in their favor? I usually call them out in the chat. I usually go send that garbage somewhere else, trash man truther. Right. That's where that's where I usually do. I'm not the guy that just lets bad trades sit, because I can't stand that when people do that to me, like letting trades just sit forever. I automatically automatically decline it, and then I usually talk to them in the DMs and be like, come on, man, I'm not some schlub that you're going to rip off every single.
Isn't it funny?
Trade.
Isn't it funny how there's a whole culture around dynasty trading and rejecting, and some people that I've talked to think that calling out in the chat is below the belt. I love the calling out in the chat because I want the rest of the room to know. You have to publicly shame people sometimes to get the
man. Want, right? when it's blatantly bad and they are. Like when it's disrespecting your intelligence, right? That's when I go that way. But
like, I'll give you an example. I'll give the audience an example. For example, if someone if someone sends you a trade of like Tyler Boyd and their second round pick for Jamar Chase, that would be an example of like what we're talking about here. Like these totally like, you'd have to, it's just like not even a thought. It's not even a starter. And people will sometimes come back to you and say, well, I was just getting the negotiation going. No, that's not getting the negotiation going. So let me give the audience a few tips, which I think, and I like what you said. You build rapport, but also take the time, look at your opponent's roster, see what they need. Because if they're loaded at wide receiver and you're asking, and they're thin at running back, don't go asking them for a running back. Just move on to the next roster. So see where trades happen when there's a surplus and a deficit, right? When one team has a surplus of a position 100%. And the other team has a deficit, and the opposite surplus and deficit lines up. So then you're a good trading partner. And at that point, what I like to do is say, I don't mind overpaying for a trade. Everyone says, oh, who won this trade? If it's going to help my team. If I'm one wide receiver 2 away from what I think can really make a run, and let's call that wide receiver 2, let's just say DJ Moore, right? He's a fringe wide receiver 1, receiver 2. I don't mind overpaying for that if it fills a need. Maybe I give, an older wide like DeAndre Hopkins and my first round pick. If I, again, that's a true overpay, but you get the point, is overpaying in order to fill a need. Obviously you wouldn't trade DeAndre Hopkins for you need a wide receiver 2, but you get the point. Zeke Elliott and a second round pick for DJ Moore would be an overpay. But if I'm loaded at running back and I feel like I just need that one piece, it's okay to overpay. Not everyone agrees with that.
Oh, I would do that deal. I'm actually okay with that. Like I'm the guy where I'm okay with losing a trade here and there. Like that is totally fine, especially if I'm targeting a specific player and it's, I have real conviction about him. I definitely am willing to not grossly overpay, but some people see my trades and they go, why did you do that? I go, because I'm going all in. I'm trying to win the championship here. Like that is the situations where I'm willing to overpay a little bit and willing to eat some crow on the chat to be able to acquire an asset that's going to get me over the top. Like that is totally fine. Everybody wants to have those trades where you win by 50% and you just crush the trade. Those are few and far.
The trade calculator people, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where people need to understand is like these trade calculators are, garbage. A lot of them, they're pretty garbage, like that's what I'm saying. These trade calculators have picks way overvalued in my opinion, because half these picks are busts.
If you're a trade calculator person, don't send me your trade calculator screenshot with the values. Use it as a guide if you're new to Dynasty. I don't mind that. It's a tool, but there's a lot of other factors in. All right, Brandon 100%. Adam, you did it, man. The reason I had you on the podcast is because I love people that are passionate about Dynasty fantasy football. You lack for no passion. You're a sharp player. I really like the analysis that you give, and I think that anyone listening to this podcast I strongly endorse them going to follow you on Twitter at Brandon D. Adam 19. His name will be linked and his Twitter will be linked in the video description below or in the podcast if you're listening there. He's generous with his advice. He loves football conversation. It's approachable. Brandon, man, I've known you for a while on Twitter. I hope one day I get to meet you. I love you as a person, man. I think you're the greatest. And people can find you now every week on the Flex Network podcast.
Yes, sir.
On the what's the YouTube channel? Is it just to search the Flex Network?
Just search the Flex Network, and you will see our fantasy football podcast pop up. And just subscribe and enjoy the show. And if you don't agree with us, we're all about you ripping us apart. If you don't agree, I'm not gonna get all weird about it. Like you guys, that's why I was totally fine coming on this pod with you because you're a smart, sharp guy. And if you catch me slipping, you're going to tell me. Like, it's just straight up. Like, that's what it is.
We're in the prediction business. So if you're in the prediction business and you get like 60% right, wow, you're killing it. So, and just think about sports bettors, right? I mean, the best sports bettors in the world are, I won't say the most profitable guys hit it like 54%. Your average sports bettor is probably going to lose and be well below that. So, we're in the prediction business. So I think it's just trying to deliver plausible fantasy content in an entertaining way. And right now, if you're into Dynasty and you're watching this podcast, what I strongly advise you to do is go check out the RotoWire Superflex Dynasty rankings. I just updated them. I just sanded them down. And right now, you can get RotoWire for free for 10 days. There's no credit card. Just put your email in. Just go to rotowire.com/try, and you get everything at RotoWire for 10 days. It just lapses. There's nothing to renew, nothing to cancel. All right, Brandon Adam, you did it. I appreciate you coming on, and I look forward to listening to your guys' pod, and we'll have you back on as the season progresses. All right, man?
Hey, we're going to have you on soon, too.
Yep. No doubt. I told Shane yesterday I'll come on anytime. All right, man. Until next week, we'll be back with another episode every Monday in the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast feed. Until next time, goodbye.